Hi everyone, and welcome to Enjoy Beekeeping. Today we're going to talk about beekeeping mentors, why they're great to have, why you might even want to hire one, and why you might even want to fire one, or at least keep them on as a consultant. Hi everyone, I'm Gene Renee, and today we're going to talk about bees because it's too cold outside to do anything with our bees. That's what beekeepers do in the winter. We're going to talk today about mentors, and I'll tell you a little bit about my journey in beekeeping. I remember when I first saw bees up close and personal was at an Asian market. I was about 8 or 9 years old, and my parents loved to go shop at this Asian market. Anyway, it was kind of a big deal when we went there because in the middle of the shop is where the cash register was, and the owner had an observation beehive that just came right down out of the ceiling. And I can never forget that first moment when I looked at those bees and I was just blown away. My parents were shopping around the store. They could just leave me there and they wouldn't have to worry about where they're going to find me. Even if they shopped for an hour, I would stay right there watching those bees. And I knew at that moment that this was so cool that I needed to do this. I had to figure out a way. I didn't know how, but I was going to have bees at some point in my life. Well, fast forward to the year 2008. And that's when I finally was able to get my hands on bees. And by then, my kids were old enough where they could, take care of themselves. They knew where the fridge was and all that, so I didn't have to worry about them trying to put forks and stuff and knives into light sockets and destroy their house or themselves or anything. So I said, I'm going to do something that I've been wanting to do ever since I was their age. So I've got some close family members, believe it or not, that are commercial beekeepers, and we see them all the time. And every time I would ask them for bees, they were always too busy, or maybe next time. I guess they were too busy. And to invest the time in helping someone with bees, it takes a little bit of energy, and so maybe they just didn't want that burden, because I would probably become a burden with a million questions. So if any of you are on that path now, you know what I'm talking about. Beekeepers who are learning have lots and lots of questions, and that's great, and that's exactly what you need to do in order to grow. So let me tell you a little bit about what happened. I knew that I wanted to learn beekeeping, but I also wanted to kind of keep things within what I consider, for lack of better words, my core values. I like to eat organic and I like to eat natural. I'm into that whole homesteading thing. I love the self-sufficiency stuff. I'm not there yet, but I'm working on it. And that all appeals to me. So I was kind of seeking out someone who might be somewhere in that wheelhouse. And I actually did find an old-timey beekeeper that used natural methods, or close to what we'll call soft treatments. He didn't use any toxic chemicals to treat his bees, because I didn't want that in my honey. And he used organic oils. You can use pharmaceutical grade or food grade essential oils to kind of take care of disease and keep things in check with your bees. So this was an individual that I said, yeah, I think that's the route I want to go. So he lived about maybe an hour from my house, and I'll never forget, he said, if you want to learn beekeeping, he says, here's what we're going to do. You're going to pay me $500, and then you can come to my house any day of the week that you want, and that's all I do. He's retired. He goes, this is all I do, is take care of bees. And he had a lot of bees, trust me. He had hundreds of beehives on his property. And I was just like, oh, this is heaven. Sign me up. So I did. I paid the $500. Now that was a lot of money, because that's going back several years now. I've been doing this for about 15, 16 years. So, we're going back in time a little bit. And it was so funny, because the way this started to work out. Okay, so my first day, guess what I did? Didn't do nothing with bees. He said, today we're going to paint supers. That's all I did. I just grabbed a paintbrush. Well, he put a paintbrush in my hand. He says, here's a can of paint. He took me over to his barn, and he had a covered area, and he had probably about what looked like 1,000 supers. Over time they kind of get beat up, but if you put a coat of paint on a hive body, it will last you 3, 4, 5, 6 more years. So he says, okay, Gene, have at it. I'll see you in a few hours. That was my first lesson. So that's how it started. And you know, the funny thing is, I knew that I felt like this is Tom Sawyer. That's exactly what Tom Sawyer did. He made it look cool painting a fence, and I guess he got kids to even pay him to come paint the fence that he was supposed to do. So I knew I was being Tom Sawyered or punked. You know, it felt like it anyway. But then I met other students that were learning. So they also were just like me. They wanted to learn something from a guy that kind of had the same methodology, or at least the thinking, I should say. The thinking about doing things naturally as much as we could find in the area. Because I even thought about joining a bee club. And, you know, looking back, I got nothing against bee clubs. I love visiting bee clubs. They're some of the coolest people that I've ever met are at bee clubs. And you know how it is when you get a bunch of beekeepers together in a room. You know, you gotta, you know, turn the light switch on and off to get them out of the building. So they're great people to hang with. But one of the things that made me opt not to take that route, I knew one of the things that a lot of bee clubs teach is a miniature version of a commercial migratory system. Which, you know, even with my limited knowledge, I knew that really wasn't the direction I wanted to go in. I knew I wanted to take care of bees, but I was more interested in long-term sustainability. So one of the things that even I teach, and I've got a class that I teach, one of the things that I do teach folks is to just kind of help them think through this a little bit is, you know, if you wanted to learn how to raise chickens, for example, I have chickens, but I know I wouldn't drive up to Gainesville, which is about 45 minutes from where I live. Now, Gainesville, Georgia is the chicken capital of the world. And the one thing that you'll never see in Gainesville is a chicken crossing the road. Why is that? Because they're all jammed up in those chicken concentration camps. That's what I call them. So they got 50,000 birds all jammed up tight in there. They're living in the dark. They're living in ammonia-filled poop and everything else. So yeah, I'm not going to learn that method of how to raise chickens. I think chickens would live naturally outdoors in fresh air and sunshine where they're happy and they're chasing bugs and they're turning your kitchen scraps into delicious eggs or, you know, or maybe chicken dinner if you eat chicken. So I knew I wasn't going to Gainesville to learn how to raise chickens. Okay, so I tell people the same thing. When it comes to beekeeping, you know, you have to ask yourself the question, okay, why would I want to make a miniature version of a commercial migratory beekeeping operation in my own backyard? Are you going to be moving your bees around from place to place? Probably not. Most backyard beekeepers, and that's probably about 95% of us, they're never going to go anywhere. They're going to stay in the same spot. Maybe you might make a split and you're going to put one 50 feet away over here somewhere. But for the most part, your bees are going to stay where you live. Maybe you'll set one up at a buddy's house not too far away. But you're probably not going to load them onto a trailer and move them around from one honey flow to another, you know, crossing state lines and so on and so on. So you have to kind of analyze yourself a little bit because maybe there are some who do want to go big or go home. They want a big apiary, and that's what I was actually starting to learn from my mentor, Don. Now, Don didn't do the migratory operation, but from Don, now I'll tell you what, I learned a ton of stuff. After the first day of painting supers, you know, I kept coming back because there was no way I was going to pay $500 and get gypped on this deal. I was going to make him feel like he got ripped off because I'd be following him around all day long. So I would come out on my off days and spend 3-4 hours if I could. And we learned all kinds of things. Well, I should say I learned all kinds of things. One of the things that was so funny about learning from Don was that he never wore a bee suit. And, you know, I asked him, I go, am I going to need a bee suit or what? He laughed. He laughed at me. And he's a bee suit, you know. So, yeah. He doesn't wear one, and then he says, and he made me feel like if I was going to wear one, you know, I'd be a sissy. So, of course, I didn't want to be a sissy, so I didn't wear a bee suit. I did get a veil. There are times where you may want a veil, but for the most part, now that's how I keep bees. I go outside all the time, and I take care of my bees. If I do inspections, I might drop the veil on my face. I've gotten popped in the nose a few times. It's not fun, but probably 4 out of 5 times that I go do an inspection, I'm not even wearing the veil. So there's a way to handle your bees. There's a right time of day to handle your bees where you get less of that aggression. But let me get back to learning from Don. If you ever have the opportunity to meet someone in person who's an experienced beekeeper, by all means, take full advantage of that. I have people come to my farm all the time, and I give them the nickel tour, and when we have classes here at the farm, we have a blast because we get to see the bees up close and personal. We get to touch the bees, and that's something you just can't get from a video. So the video is the next best thing. Now, when I was working with Don, one of the things, like I mentioned, he didn't do migratory beekeeping. So all the hundreds of bees that were there, the hundreds of colonies of bees that were there in his backyard, I mean, they were everywhere. You couldn't turn your head and not see a beehive or bees somewhere. And the way that he ran his operation was that he sold bees. So his method was feed the bees lots of sugar. So Don would go and he would bring his flatbed truck somewhere and he would get 55-gallon barrels of sugar. Just plain old sugar, just plain white sugar, not powdered sugar, not brown sugar, not organic sugar, just plain old sugar. I've even heard of beekeepers that will feed their bees Mountain Dew, the soda, pop, whatever you call it. I've heard of that too. Now, and so what Don would do, he taught me how to do the same thing, was he says, all right, we're going to feed these babies. And it was like, you know, so spring would roll around, early spring, and we would just be pouring sugar on these bees. And it would stimulate them. It would produce like an early honey flow in their minds. So they would just drink it down. They'd start making more babies. And that was the name of the game, to make as many bees as possible. So I learned how to do that. So we fed the bees, they grew in numbers, we split the bees, and then, you know, I helped Don sell the bees. And then we also made splits. And so I learned a very intense operation on how to make a lot of bees quickly. Now, the one thing that I would mention was sometimes you have to fire your mentor. And I mean that jokingly. Here's the thing. I found that I was thinking about all that we were doing. We're stimulating the bees, we're giving them sugar, feeding them even pollen patties and stuff like that, just to get them cranking, you know, to make a split on them when all the other bees in the wild were just kind of waking up, you know, and getting, oh, it's spring, you know. So that was the name of the game. So he could be selling his bees in time for that first initial honey flow. But I kept asking myself, you know, is this really sustainable? Is this what would happen if we just took away one of the cogs of the wheel? So we did feeding, we did soft treatments with using essential oils, and then we were just constantly making splits with them. But I said to myself, and I even asked Don about this, I said, so what would happen if you didn't get the sugar? Would the bees croak or what? You know? So if you're not constantly pouring the feed on them, what are they going to do? And what if you couldn't get essential oils for some reason? Would they all die from that? You know, lack of, you know, being treated. And then finally, you know, what if you just left them alone? What if you didn't do anything with them? What if you just, you know, left all these bees here? Would they all just die without you and me, you know, going through this apiary all day long, doing all kinds of stuff? Would they just keel over because we're not here? So, you know, I asked Don all these questions. I drove the guy crazy. So I was like a little kid. And anytime I'm learning something new, I become like a little kid. I got to ask a gazillion questions. So what I began to realize was, you know, Don said, hey, you know, look, he says, you walk into a room with 10 beekeepers and you know what you're going to find? You're going to probably find 10 beekeepers that do things all a little bit different, and that's okay. And eventually, even if you're just starting out, or even if you've been keeping bees for a number of years, you may have already discovered this, that you basically kind of become your own beekeeper. But what I encourage people to do is seek out other mentor type people that kind of have that same core value alignment as you do. So if you want to do things naturally, look for people like that. And there's plenty of them out there. And in fact, I did start exploring, and I found several folks. Now, some I've met in person. I've had the privilege of meeting in person, which any chance I can, if I'm within proximity, or if I'm ambitious and motivated enough and I have downtime and a little extra cash, I'll go see them. I love meeting people face to face. There's nothing like it. And the video is the closest thing that we can get to that. So again, what I was basically learning wasn't a migratory operation, but what I would call a package mill operation. So the cool thing about where I live in the Northeast Georgia area is that we have super mild winters. We're averaging probably about 45, 50 degrees during the day. That's Fahrenheit. And then at night, we're getting down right about freezing, 30, 32 degrees freezing. We're probably going to get a cold snap, one of these weeks or two, but that's about it. So we have pretty mild winters and we get a nice early spring. In fact, I was out the other day, January 4th, and I was filming the bees with my camera phone, and they were bringing pollen in already. So Georgia's a really great place to be a beekeeper. So the one thing about Georgia, though, however, is because all the southern states, we get our spring real early, and places like Florida, they don't really even have a winter. But the beekeepers there, they kind of start doing the same thing. They'll feed their bees, they'll build them up real fast so that they can sell package bees to people. So I don't know if this is a term I heard or if I'm actually the one coining the term. It probably doesn't matter, but I call these package mills. And a lot of times what winds up happening is people from the north, because they're anxious, just like you and I, we can't wait to get back into our bees, right? They'll order up these bees from a package mill early, and they'll get on sometimes a waiting list, and they'll put them on a trailer and bring them up to wherever, and they'll take those Florida bees and Texas bees and Georgia bees, and Florida bees are all over, for sale, and it's great, except that they're not really adapted to the climate where they're going. So a lot of times what happens is the beekeeper gets to enjoy the bees for the spring and summer and fall, and then a lot of them don't make it through the winter because they're really not well adapted. This is just one thing that's, kind of quirky about keeping bees, is that we don't always do what's best for our bees. When we talked about chickens just a minute ago, we were using that illustration. If you really wanted to raise chickens naturally, how would you do it? Would you go to the chicken concentration camps and learn how to keep bees like that, and then go home and cram them all into a little coop and raise them just like they do in a commercial operation? Absolutely not. That's just crazy, right? So it's really the same when it comes to any kind of livestock, okay? And if you think about this, just do a little bit of critical thinking for just a second. Where can you point to industrial agriculture and say this is really great for the animals? Think about how they raise chickens and pigs and cattle. It's really not ideal. I mean, it's money is the name of the game. Unfortunately, with beekeeping, a lot of it is true there too. So the bees get moved around quite a bit, trucked from one place to another, and bees are going to do what they do because they're trying to survive. But because we've learned that there's something really good that they make, a product called honey, we tend to abuse them. And when I say we, I'm talking about the commercial sector. The commercial sector tends to abuse bees. There are some very good stewards out there, and that's what I try to teach people. So when you're shopping for a mentor, hopefully you'll find somebody that you feel a connection with. You have those core values, and your methodologies are aligned with each other. You're going to really learn the most from somebody that you feel a connection with. But let's say you find somebody that's really smart, knows a lot about bees, but is boring or annoying. All right, well, here's the thing. Can you put up with that for a little while until you have enough knowledge where you can either fire them or, like what we were saying earlier, just keep them on as a consultant? If so, go for it. You can learn a lot from people. And I always approach everyone I meet with the assumption, and it's always right too, by the way, that regardless of their level of experience, there's probably something that I can learn from that individual. So I look at the world like that. That's my worldview. And we all learn things differently, and we all see things just a little bit different. I always assume that anyone I meet probably know something that I don't know and I could benefit from. And if you treat people like that, and if you approach them that way, you're going to find the world's going to open up to you. So I want to share with you something that I felt really benefited me, and maybe it'll help you too. I've created a list of people that I consider to be very influential mentors. If you go to my website, enjoybeekeeping.com, and you scroll down to the mentor section, I've got a list of beekeepers there that have had a profound impact on the way I keep bees. And they're there for you to just go explore. If you click on their picture, it'll take you directly to their website or some kind of source material that I think you can benefit from. So I'm so grateful that there's people out there that are willing to share. In fact, I want to share with you one thing before I go. I stumbled across a Facebook blog the one day. It was written by a beekeeper. Now, he made this claim. He says, I've been keeping bees for 50 years. And you know what I can't stand is these people that are going out there, they keep bees for 2-3 years, and then they're putting all kinds of videos on YouTube like they're experts. And down further, there was a reply to that statement. And the person said, you're probably right. But isn't it unfortunate that people with 50 years experience aren't sharing what they're learning? Instead of you complaining about the problem, you could have offered a solution. You could have shared some of your knowledge. And I couldn't agree more. I don't know everything about bees, but who does? I don't care if you've kept bees for 100 years. You're probably not going to know everything there is to know about bees. But can you share what you've learned? And that's what I wanted to do for you today. So if you visit my website, enjoybeekeeping.com, take a look. I got some free stuff on there. There's some old-time bee books that I've got on there. And again, I've got that list of mentors, people who have shaped who I've become as a beekeeper. So the one thing that they all have in common is that their approach to beekeeping is a natural one. So as you explore that page with the mentors on it, you're going to be able to meet some of the individuals that I think are going to help you on your journey towards natural beekeeping. Or if you want to get on the fast track, you can jump into my course and you're going to learn some really cool stuff. For example, one of the things that I teach in my course is how you can apply basic principles to the kind of beehive that you use. So the answer to the million-dollar question is there one beehive that is superior to all the others, or is there a principle that you can apply to make any of them work? I discuss that in my bee school. Another topic that I hit pretty good is natural management practices. And did you know that prior to the mid-70s, there were no mites in the United States? The mites that attack bees and wipe out colonies, there wasn't any. You could just get bees, you could get a package of bees for 10 or 15 bucks. Can you imagine how cool that would be to just get a package of bees for 10 or 15 bucks? I think they added a zero onto that number now. They're 150 and up for packages. I think some of them I see going for $250 just for a package. Anyway, prior to the mid-70s, beekeeping was super easy because you didn't have mites attacking them. Did you know that in that same period of time when mites arrived, they also attacked the feral colonies that were living in the forests? And the mites wiped out 97% of the feral colonies. What you'll be pleased to know is about 3 years later, the population of bees rebounded back to their original numbers before Varroa. Now the question is how did they do it? There were no beekeepers out there putting treatments in the trees, so how did they do it? Well, that's something that I cover in my natural management class. A few other things that I cover in my course is what kind of hive should I put my bees in? Should I put them in the sun? Should I put them in the shade? Should I feed them? Shouldn't I feed them? Should I treat them? If so, with what? These are questions that beekeepers need answers to. Well, friends, it was great spending a little time talking to you today about mentors, my mentors, how they've shaped me into becoming the beekeeper that I am today. Hopefully some of this information will help you too. So until next time, friends, EJ, BK, enjoy beekeeping. And for those of you who sign, let me see it. You can let me know if I do it right. EJ, BK, enjoy beekeeping.